next up is what is Claude? And like Carla said earlier, who is Claude? So Claude is a LLM developed by Anthropic. It was released last year, March, so it's about a year old. And hey, Sue, I've got a little bit of feedback. Carlos, I don't know if you can mute that mic manually yourself. Um, it was released last March, and they just came out with a new model. I think it was just like last week. I think it was on March 7th this year, and that's supposedly one of the fastest models out right now. And just they're the first ones to kind of have where there's some data tests, and I'll show a little bit of those graphs, just barely edging out GPT-4, which is pretty interesting, which also means it's beating Gemini model from Google right now. So interesting, and I'm saying fastest. It's not necessarily the fastest. It's really more better with reasoning. So I apologize for that error. I need to fix that. Cost wise, there's a free version, which is Claude 3 Sonnet, and that's comparable to like ChatGPT 3, maybe somewhere in between like GPT-3, 3.5 and 4. I think in some areas it's maybe comparable to 4, and then some areas it's a little closer to 3.5. And then this paid version, I've not messed with that one yet, but Claude 3 Opus, and it's slightly faster than GPT, and that's what I'm going to show a little bit of. So I'm going to do some side-by-side demos of this. If I could get back out of my slide deck here. And I already prepared a few of these to kind of show. And I made a pretty simple snippet here. And let me go to Claude first. Actually, I'm going to pull these out so you guys can kind of see them happening side by side and see how they run. So this is Claude. I'm going to go ahead and start him running first. And then right beside it, I'm going to pull out Gemini and GPT and start to run that one too. So you can kind of see these running. Make these windows smaller. And so the prompt that I'm giving it is I'm trying to give it something that is pretty similar. It's I would never actually post a blog like this or documentation, but I've asked it to write some instructional documentation about launching a website on the Shopify platform. The detailed document needs to provide a thorough level of information, and it needs to be about over 1,500 words. So this is a really cool way to kind of test the models and kind of see. There's a lot of other tests, so this isn't the best one, but I wanted to let everybody see kind of side by side kind of how they're running. This is a Gemini here. Let me move GPT. Now that Claude's finished, I'm going to start running the ChatGPT 4. And I got an error. That was funny. Okay. And it looks like Gemini is done testing. I'm going to say continue because I think it got hung up. And so it's a little frustrating sometimes when I was even doing some testing beforehand, and this is a good example where these GPTs get hung up and when you're asking for a lot of output. So same thing in the news. Again, the data that you sometimes hear about these things is just how good they are, how much data they can do. But in this example, I had to push Gemini to continue. It's still going, but I had to tell it to continue going. Here's another example where GPT-4 got hung up. And look, it's, I've got to hit continue generating. So when you push the content level of like how much output you want, it's where I really find like all these models just kind of fail a little bit. And I know I mainly was needing to talk about Claude a little bit, but this just gets me on to the topic of how these things are still growing. They're still in this like alpha beta mode. And yes, they are able to take a ton of data and chomp a lot of data. Like you could feed it books of PDFs, but at the end of the day, the output that it can give you is still like very limited. And I wanted to show that I'm going to pull like all this data from Claude. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to put it in this Google Doc and paste it. And there's a command key, Command Shift C, and it'll show you how many words it is. And so I asked for 1,500 words. I actually did this earlier today. I did get 1,600 out of Claude, but I had to reprompt it again. If you guys want to see me go through that, one of the things I said to it earlier today, I said my job depends on this document being over 1,500 words. Please provide more detail. And I ran it through Claude again. I've heard stories of people saying, if I pay you $5,000, will you please make it, do this thing? And they'll sometimes kind of like get these large language models to kind of like push a little harder. It's very funny that you have to kind of do that when I told it to do it in the first place, but it's like saying, please do what I ask. So you can see it didn't hit the mark, but let's go look at the others in comparison. So here's ChatGPT. Again, ChatGPT is like supposed to be the best out there. So let me write that down. Claude was at 1,100 and GPT is like 851. So 851 or yeah, 851, and that's GPT. And then let's go look at Google Gemini. So Gemini, I had to run two different ones just to get it all together because it kind of crashed and I had to start it back up and tell it to continue. So I'm going to have to do two different copy pastes here just to move it over. And let's see how big that is. Oh, 1120. That's not bad. So this time, Claude and Google were about a tie. So it's kind of interesting to see, but I wanted you guys to see that, Claude's a good competitor. This is running Opus. The Sonnet mode is supposed to be a little better. It will be interesting to see kind of like as all these, different LLMs continue to kind of battle it out for the top, who's going to end up there. Is there a question? I think it's just some background noise. But
Yeah, sorry, Nathan.
yes, go ahead.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Cool. Sorry, let me get the camera. Hi, everyone. Uh, so just to comment on and this is just terrific chat, everything. So thank you, and thank you for the invitation to it. I think the whole thing on politeness and like just asking it to do stuff nicely goes very much of a long way. And now that you can do audio with GPT, and I'm curious, what's your experience with the audio is really the question, but I think it's also next level. So
No,
awesome.
that's great feedback. I agree, and I am going to talk a little bit about the audio, especially as I get into Pi. Thanks for giving that feedback. It's going to be interesting to see, where that goes. And I've seen a lot of feedback where just being a little bit more personal. The, way I think about these LLMs, and when I've heard, where these language models, they are trying their best to kind of give us the answer in the best way possible. It wants to kind of answer that question correctly. And it's sometimes what gives it a little, it's like it almost wants to please us and make us happy. It's what gives people going, is this real? It makes you feel like you're talking with a human, and that's why. But it's not. It's just, it's just a robot, it's just a computer, and it's just trying to communicate. But going back to Claude real quick, and then I'm gonna jump into the last thing, which is real exciting with showing off Pi and where it's going right now. But here's Claude Opus, and this is a website. I'll put this in here. If anybody just wants to geek out and go crazy, there's a ton of data in here. It's a little over the top. I don't really get into it like this, but if you want to know like who's currently leading, it just shows you time and time again, like GPT-4 is just dominating the market still, but it's the first time one's ever been like it's just 1% higher. And I don't even know if we'd be able to tell. I'm sure it was a computer that had to generate a ton of tests to even kind of get to that point. But when it comes to speed and price, and this is where I misspoke earlier when I was saying Claude is not the fastest. These other models are, and the GPT-4 Turbo is definitely has a little bit more. But at this point, I prefer, content and reasoning and quality way over speed. So there'll be a time later where if it was neck and neck, I might, but the ability to do like custom GPTs, having saved chats, and there's so many other features that the mobile app has that I went over last week that just to me still makes ChatGPT 4 the number one. So, but you can see it's the first time ever one's kind of come up to bat, and Claude hasn't been around that long. So OpenAI has been working on this stuff a lot longer. So it's interesting to see. There's a lot of other versions in here. I'm not going to get around like what they are and who's using which one. We'd have to have a whole separate chat on that, but interesting to see. Next up, if there's not any other questions, I'll jump into